Yeah, thank you all for joining. I think it's a really interesting time to be doing data governance at the moment, particularly with AI governance. Um, Something we don't know whether we should be doing or not. And I think it's something that Jovita is very good at explaining. So, if you didn't listen to the podcast, let me introduce you to Jovita Tam. She's a business focused data and AI advisor. And interestingly, she's also an attorney, a lawyer. And I think this why I think that it just gets it's perhaps it's that legal mind, the way you think about things, Jovita. But I think I love my conversations with Jovita. She's got a really good way of explaining things. And I have been really looking forward to this masterclass all week. So, I am going to ask you all to go on mute. If you don't, I will put you on mute because otherwise things happen in the background beyond your control, normally like my dogs and things. And we'll let Yovita have the floor. If you've got any questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat and I will ask Yovita as many of them as we've got time for when she's taken us through the slides. But please do ask questions. We'll love to hear your views and thoughts on what we do. So I think it's over to you, Yovita.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and thank you for having me. And as Nicola has mentioned, this is an extension to a podcast that we have recorded together, and it was released about 4 weeks ago. So, sharing the same title as the podcast, today we're going to be talking about unexpected AI governance leader, and let's get started. So, let's see if my slides is working. So, for today's masterclass, I wanted to cover four topics. The first one is I want to walk us through a practical assessment of how to evaluate AI governance opportunities. So, a general idea is what are we walking ourselves into, and how do we tell what we're walking ourselves into? The next thing is looking at strategies of leveraging your data governance expertise in the AI context. So, what is the same? What is potentially different? Of course, there'll be variations, and I'll be talking about that more as we get to that part of the presentations. Next thing is about approaches to negotiating resources and managing the expanded responsibilities, because this is something that I learned very, very early on in my career as both kind of a consultant and an attorney is you negotiate early and you negotiate before you start. So the time is now to be thinking about this. And the last thing that we'll be going over is I'll be making some suggestions in terms of how to make your AI governance complement your existing programs. So that's more of an exercise as I've prepared for us. So I just want to poll the room very, very quickly. And Nicola, if you could help me with this because I can't really see the chat. I want to get a general sense from the room of who in the room have already picked up AI governance responsibilities in your organization, who is thinking about it, who is kind of seeing the writing on the wall for the next, weeks, months, whatever that is. So I just want to get a little bit of understanding of the room. So if you could please drop something in the chat right now, that'd be great. Next thing that I'm hoping to better understand from the audience is where are you based? So whether you're Europe based or you're based in the US or somewhere in Asia or Latin, wherever, let me know. I will try and tailor some of the content. And of course, if you have specific questions about your region and maybe your industry, so let's say you're in the regulated industry versus not, I can try and take up some of those during the questions part in the last 15 minutes. So that's a little bit of a mouthful. So Nicola, if you can help me,
They
let
are
me know what responses come back. That'd be
they're
great.
coming in. Wow, we got somebody who's started that already. He's Melbourne. Wow. It must be the middle of the night. You're very keen.
Thank you.
Somebody who's saying that they're in Boston, but Infosec has taken the AI lead. Somebody started doing it in Dublin. Pradnya's in the Netherlands. She already had a role. She's already got in a role with AI governance responsibilities. We've got somebody who's UK based in Asia. Wow, it's all over the place. London based looking to transition from data governance to AI governance, which is really,
Okay.
I think it's I hope they'll agree by the end of this, probably a logical move. We know we need it, but no resources allocated. Somebody else from Melbourne. Honestly, you all are so keen. I would have been watching that on replay. I'll be really, really honest. Not started yet in Belgium, Italy, France, UK.
Okay.
Yes, somebody else who's coming from, they're in Hampshire in the UK, but looking at picking up AI alongside existing data governance. Somebody in South Africa, Canada, Ireland.
Okay.
Wow, all over the place. This is amazing. I do love that I get such global audiences. It's really exciting. Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
And again, thank you everybody for joining. And I'm going to try and cover, as much a variety as I can during the presentation. But if there's specific questions that you have about, your situation or whatever, feel free to kind of DM me via LinkedIn. After this workshop, I'll be including my LinkedIn information in the last slide. So let's start off with kind of the basics, right? What is AI governance? Now, this is one of the slides I use for this type of presentation because that as I talk to more and more people, what I have found is that there isn't a single definition when it comes to AI governance, right? And a lot of organizations are starting their journey or is already on their kind of AI enablement path or AI governance path without really coming together to think about what is their version of AI governance and what does it mean to them. So for the purpose of today's conversation, I want to share with you my definition of AI governance. And I want to highlight that the scope of AI governance, in my mind, extends well beyond AI compliance, meaning that it's not just about, okay, checking the box or not breaking the law, whether it's specific AI legislation or whether it's like, related regulations. So it's not just about compliance. And it is a balancing act between responsible AI and effectively managing AI risk. And when I say AI risk, that will depend on where your company is in their journey, what type of AI they're deploying, what they're looking to do with it, where they're in the value chain, so on and so forth. And I want to highlight that maintaining this balance is a dynamic act and it will require continuous action. So I think as data governance professional, one of the frustration is that often company will feel like that it is a project-based effort, right? Meaning that it's something that we do and then, budget goes away, executive support goes away, and we don't need to kind of keep up with it, right? And we know that, for data governance to be successful in an organization, it really is a program-based thing, is a living organism. It'll continue to evolve. And I believe the same thing is true with AI governance. And one thing that, we'll go over later on is, well, how can we potentially share with the company that this is the case, right? And in the case of AI, there's actually something that we can leverage, right? So if you look at it, because AI risk for, let's say, an AI product will exist in all parts of the life cycle, from the design phase all the way to the decommissioning phase, right? And if we look at things like model drift of a Gen AI model and the type of maintenance that we need to do, like, and that will be like after we deploy it and so on and so forth. Now there's now more of a reason that we can point to say, hey, you can't treat this like a project, you have to treat it like a program. And my personal view is that AI governance is an enabler to innovation. It allows us to do it responsibly, and I hope everybody in the room will agree with that AI governance is an enabler and it doesn't kind of inhibit innovation. And at least if we do it right. And in a corner there, what I have is a myth, right? So some people believe that, okay, problems only happen because of malice and because of incompetence. And I don't believe that to be true. I think that, like, even without malice and without incompetence, things could potentially go wrong. And that's why we should always have AI governance in place when we're working with AI instead of wait until something blows up, right? So I know that, previously when we pull the room, there's oh, that function has yet been filled, but we really need it, right? So it's the idea of when do we introduce it, and it's not after something happens. Hopefully, we have the foresight to at least be able to put something in place right now. So again, the takeaway for this slide is my version of AI governance to you, and this is something that within an organization, something that we need to think about what it means and get aligned on, because people don't naturally agree on what is AI governance? And it could seem very simple, but it's not. Okay. So, next thing that we were going to cover today is taking a look at data governance and taking a look at AI governance and taking a look at what is mostly the same and what is something new. So, what I've done is I've picked out 5 things that I feel like are mostly the same in terms of skills, and then 5 things that I believe are something perhaps new for most data governance professionals. And I will be going through each of these points in turn in the coming 2 slides. So if you want, feel free to grab a screenshot at this point in time, just as a cheat sheet. And one thing that I do want to mention is depending on your role, right, in AI governance, you may or may not be required to use all of these skills. So, roles and responsibility varies where you're in your maturity journey in terms of the organization also varies. So don't worry if you're like, oh, wow, this is completely outside of my comfort zone right now. And this is why we are going to have the negotiation session towards the end of this presentation is, well, if this is something that we feel like we potentially need to be successful in putting together our AI governance program in the near term, we could negotiate for it. But at least we know what's coming, right? Okay, so let's start by leveraging your data governance expertise for AI governance, right? The first thing should be obvious, I feel like, for everybody that's in this room right now, is working with stakeholders. Yay! I know this is a Friday, so I'm trying to get everybody to be energized. But when you hear stakeholder management in data governance, I get one of two responses usually. I usually get a, or I get a, yeah, good. I actually have a pretty supportive group of stakeholders that I've been working with for years. And here I want to point out that AI governance is most definitely a team sport as well. So, all of the skills that you have built in working with stakeholders, managing stakeholders' expectation, working across the organization, because as we all know, data cuts across the organization, and AI is a horizontal technology, meaning that it could be in any department, in any parts of the business process, depending on how you deploy it. So, good news is everything that you have built up, all of the relationships, all of the things that you've learned, you can most definitely just bring it forward and use it when you're setting up your AI governance program. Now, I do want to point out that with AI governance, depending on what you're looking to focus on, you may notice that you have a lot of overlap in terms of stakeholders, but you may also have some new ones. So that's something to keep in mind. So don't just take your existing data governance stakeholder base and just port it to AI governance, because there are going to be potentially some new players. And the next thing is that the dynamics may be different. So, for example, right, for a lot of organizations right now, their challenges with AI governance is sitting with procurement. The reason for that is because they're, acquiring or using a lot of third party tools. So, in addition to just managing the traditional third party risk, they're now thinking about, well, what type of AI is being introduced into our ecosystem through the things that we procure, right? That would be an example of it. Another thing to keep in mind here is that the hierarchy, right? So, maybe in the past within your organization, you may be focused in building relationships with just senior stakeholders, right? Your head of HR, for example, your CISO, for example. But in some cases, depending on what you are doing, so say you are in a software company now and they're building an AI based product and you're trying to help them build a more compliant product, right? Or put some guardrails around their product development phase, you may find that you need to work with a range of professionals in the hierarchy, not just the head ofs, because you need to directly now learning about the product, maybe communicating with developers and engineers who are, fingers on a keyboard every single day, making key decisions. So the second thing that you can leverage from your data governance expertise is working with policies and governance frameworks and operation models. So when working with data, we have data governance by design, we have data privacy by design, and the whole idea of which is we don't want to be in the position where we are being reactive. We don't want to come in and fix things afterwards. And the same thing is going to be true when it comes to AI governance. So again, how that actually works within your organization, because we all know putting words on paper, calling it in a policy, filing it away is not even close to data governance. It's an aspect of it, but it doesn't actually change behavior. So whatever skills that we have learned there, right? How to craft the messaging, what to put down, working with key stakeholders, that is another area that we can leverage our skills. Next one is the art of strategic balance, right? Going back to the definition that I had shared with you earlier about AI governance, balancing is a very important part of the success of your AI governance program and data governance program. And for those of you who may have seen some of my talks before, you may know that I'm a yogi, and one of the things that I work on is my balance, right? So my tree pose, I'm much more of a flexibility person, and balancing is something that I truly need to work on. So going back to how I was like thinking about all of these, I was like, with balance is a very tricky thing because it's really dynamic. The minute that you feel like, okay, I got this, right, is when you fall out of your pose. And same things happens here. And this is not something because, oh, we're in a hype cycle, things are changing very quickly. It's just the nature of it where all of the pieces are changing at the same time, right? And there's also another piece that's important here, why it makes it a balancing act. Now, we have people from all over the world joining today. So, each of you may be familiar with the either specific AI legislation that is, within your region that applies to your jurisdiction. And you might be familiar with some of the more international frameworks. But if you're working in a setting where it's a little bit more international, right, which is most company these days, it could be because you have a client in a region outside of where your headquarters is located, you have a development team elsewhere. Again, we're looking at this mostly as an international, global kind of a situation. You will know that it is quite fragmented at the moment when it comes to the AI legislation landscape. So what does that mean, right? So that means that some jurisdictions, like the EU, have adopted a proportional approach when it comes to this. So it's a risk-based approach. Again, by nature of it, that's a balancing act. Now, more challenging is that you are then juggling with the legislation and the expectations across multiple regions. And there is definitely a juggling act because although, this is governance 101, right? Nobody wants to lose money. Nobody wants things to blow up on their watch. But at the same time, nobody wants the governance and operational cost to eat into their profits. So prioritization and balancing continues to be very important. And you've fought a lot of these battles when you're working through and leading your data governance program. So you can apply what you've learned when you're building your AI governance program. Next topic is something that's very dear and close to my heart. I believe that it's always all about the people. I think that data governance is not sitting here just exchanging technical talks. It is about from one person to the next person, right? It is about empowering, it is about enabling. And I believe the same thing is true when it comes to AI and AI governance, that it should be very much human centered. Now, this can come across things like having an expert in the loop, but it could also be something that's even much more basic than that. Because I've been working with some clients, and essentially, when a message comes out, like say a corporate email comes out about AI, it literally causes a panic because people are like, well, when you're talking about, AI is the future and we're going to gain, let's say 25% efficiency, doesn't mean 25% of us is going to lose our jobs, right? And so again, our relationship as AI evolves, right? As AI evolves, our relationship with some of the existing systems that we know with technology is changing. So when we're sitting here helping people with this enablement, helping people put guardrails around the work that they do to make sure we're doing it safely for each other, human remains at the center of it. So again, all of the relationships that you've built, all of the trust that you've built within your organization when working with data governance, that will continue to apply. And last thing is that I do believe data governance is change management in a nutshell. I believe that every successful data governance leader is a change, like a leader for change at the very core of their hearts, and they're shaping their organization. And that will continue to be the case when it comes to AI governance. And communication is extremely important for data governance professional, and that will continue to be very important for AI governance professionals. So those are the 5 things that I feel like are at the top of the list in terms of what you can leverage in building AI governance for your organization. And because of this overlap, if you already have a pretty strong foundation when it comes to data governance within your organization, I think you can leverage a lot of that as the starting point for your AI governance program. So next, let's get out of our comfort zone a little bit, because although there are a number of things which are quite similar in terms of skills, there are also a number of things that could be different. And again, the idea here is not that you have to become an expert in all of these things, and they may not show up all at once in the beginning of your journey. But as you move forward, these are 5 relevant pieces that I want you to become aware of. So don't panic if you're like, oh my God, like this is not something that I want to sign up for. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it, but it would be essential to any successful AI governance program, in my opinion. The first one is getting comfortable with ambiguity and emerging regulations, right? So when we work with data governance, and we are seeing more data related regulatory discussions and talks, and we're seeing a few, data governance or data type regulations out there. But when it comes to AI, for a lot of companies, right, the reason why they're looking at potentially having an AI governance program is not necessarily because they would like to do the right thing. I think in their hearts they believe that, but to justify the budget and to pull the trigger to do it, for many organizations, it does come down to AI compliance, right? Where we know is a subset of AI governance. And when you look at compliance, you are looking at a bunch of regulations that already exist out there, right? The EUA Act is already in force. We're expecting more of it to come into force moving forward with, I think 2026 is where the high-risk systems portion of it is going to come into force. And that I'm already seeing in the marketplace, a lot more people are interested in asking because of it, right? And as I mentioned previously, because we have a global audience who are potentially working with organizations with a global and international footprint, there is the idea of the fragmentation or things are not harmonized just yet, right? So, as a professional, as a leader in this area, working with your maybe legal SME or regulatory SME to sit here and help prioritize your efforts, justify, explain, to assess risk, right? So being comfortable with this ambiguity and knowing that there's strong regulatory kind of requirements and framework behind it is an important skill. The next one is product management fluency. So, a lot of organizations who previously weren't really even thinking about guardrails, risk, compliance, is now potentially thinking and looking at AI governance because they're seeing the opportunity in potentially making a profit by embedding AI and generative AI into their product. So what does that mean for data governance professionals? Well, that means that like when we're sitting here looking at policies and procedures, we need to now have a much better understanding in terms of the product development lifecycle, right? In terms of how and when decisions are being made, potentially understanding what we can roll back, what we cannot roll back, right? To again help that group understand the impact of their work, the impact of putting guardrails around what they're doing. So, understanding, having product knowledge is going to be very important. Or potentially that is not where you're at, in terms of your journey. It could be that, your organization that isn't looking to build any product, isn't looking to, kind of expand in this area. And it's just about using, generative AI. How can we leverage that, right? But for a lot of data governance professionals, kind of entering into organizations where traditionally they're not regulated, but now because they're looking at AI products, they now need to think about AI governance. This is going to be a very, very essential skill. Next thing is model lifecycle and performance oversight. So again, this is a new area, I feel like, for data governance professionals. So when it comes to, let's say if you are at a financial institution, right, model validation is going to be something that is existingly kind of on your portfolio, right, when it comes to the governance posture. But when it comes to generative AI model validation, from a technical perspective, it is quite different than for traditional AI and ML models, right? We are going to have, and this is when we're looking at things like, for example, responsible AI. We're looking at things like explainability. We're looking at things like transparency, and we're looking at drift and the like. The game looks a lot different. So this is definitely a known challenge when it comes to AI governance. And it is not something that has been resolved yet. So as a data governance professional, this may not be an area that you are super familiar with, but you may be asked to provide guidance to the model validation team in your organization, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. Next is tech forward experiment mindset, right? Again, this is much more closely related to the product management fluency as a new skill. So again, this really depends on the organization that you work at, what they're doing with AI. If the intention here for the organization is for them to do more experimentation and for them to roll out more AI product type things, then there is potentially the mindset that is like, okay, well, how are we going to run this? We're going to run this agile. We're going to test. We're going to experiment, and we're going to do this quickly and fail fast, right? And that may be contrary to the way that other branches of that business have been handling how they move forward, right? And when it comes to data governance, it's like, well, how do we help them and with enough guardrails so that we can enable this innovation, help them make better decisions without like making the box too small so that we're being labeled as business prevention, right? Because that's most definitely not who we are. And that's not the label that we would like. Because if we have that as a label, then that significantly erodes trust. So there might be a mindset shift that's required. Now, the last thing I feel like, which is a key area to highlight, and this is one of those areas where I think there's a disconnect when you hear a lot of people talk about responsible AI. I think that, and when we actually put it into an AI governance program, um, responsible AI, I think, is extremely important. It is something that I feel like isn't a bright line idea, right? And an example that I often give is, well, what's the responsible time of going to bed, right? Is the responsible time of going to bed like 10 p.m.? Or is the responsible time of going to bed like 3 a.m.? Well, the answer is it kind of depends, right? It depends on who you are. It depends on your life habits. Now, I'm not advocating that if you can justify that you can go to bed at 3 a.m. being a responsible choice, that you immediately kind of go leap at that and go do it, right? But an example would be that let's say you're doing shift work, right? And you're coming back, let's say at midnight, and then you're able to get enough hours of sleep and so on and so forth, then likely, being able to sleep at 3 a.m. in the morning as your bedtime is a reasonable choice. And why am I mentioning this, right? So while conceptually responsible AI makes a lot of sense, when it comes to implementation, we as AI governance professionals is going to need to help the organization find what is the line for the organization right now. What is fit for purpose, right? This is not about forcing everybody to go to bed at like 9:30 and turn your cell phone off, right? But at the same time, as we move forward on this journey, how might that evolve? And again, I think that for those of us who've been in data governance for a good number of years, a lot of things feels like an uphill battle in many different ways, right? And a lot of it is how do we justify the value that we bring to an organization, right? And we have learned over the years to have more business talks, to show metrics, and business value became some of the most important keywords I feel like for data governance professional. But as an AI governance professional, when we're sitting here looking at responsible AI, it's not just about business value, which is important, which is how we get budget, and that part of the world hasn't changed. But there is an ethical and a social impact component into it, and how we find that balance and how we articulate to our organization is, I feel like, an additional skill. So let's get to the part where we are into our practical assessment. The simple idea is this. I want to draw your attention to the two pictures that are on the left. We often hear the saying, light at the end of the tunnel. That would be your top picture. The bottom picture there is also light at the end of the tunnel, with it being headlights of an oncoming train. So are we looking at light at the end of the tunnel, the top picture, or are we looking at headlights from an oncoming train? I feel like this is an important topic. I know for all of you guys, time and space is in short supply, but I think, looking at the man on the right, it is very much worth it for you to grab a piece of paper at the end of this workshop and think about how you would do a plan if you've been tasked, or if you've already been tasked to do AI governance in your organization. Put something under the now, next, later category, right? As a mental exercise. Because only if you run through this exercise can you truly quantify this opportunity in your head. And the three things that I want you to focus on in this exercise is understanding your organization. And I think that that is very, very important. And it is easy to lose sight, as many of you guys being data governance professionals, you are fighting fires every single day. It is an exhausting job for many of us, and it is easy to lose sight of a little bit of the bigger picture as the organization evolves. So please take a step back, right? And be honest, because awareness goes a long way in this case, right? What is the organization really like when it comes with working of change, the ability to work with uncertainty? And the friendly reminder here that I want to share with you is culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, 2 snacks, and dessert. And maybe seconds for dessert. So be realistic about that, because when working with AI governance, we're going to be asking the organization to make changes. It's going to be mindset change. It's going to be behavior change as the relationship evolves. Because a lot of times, I think I've seen a lot of AI strategies with goals where it is much more ambitious than where the organization can realistically be in a reasonable amount of time. So again, when we are sitting here looking to support this function, enable this function to help them reach their goals with respect to AI, we need to be realistic about, who we're working with, right? And other things that we've already mentioned, which is impact, risk, harms, where the organization's role is in the AI supply chain, right? So what is it that they're looking to do? Are we simply in the phase where we want to turn on Copilot, in the Microsoft suite? Or are we sitting here looking to kind of build internal products or to boost productivity? Are we looking to build a product to sell into a regulated space? All of these things matter. And the maturity in terms of regulatory compliance. Can we piggyback off stuff? Can we not, right? And then the next thing is the starting point, right? I think that a lot of organizations have been working with AI for a while now. Some of them I've seen they have set up specific function. It started much more as an experimental thing. Can we do this? Can we not do that? But I think where we're in the journey now, a lot of people are looking to monetize, right? They may or may not be past the POC phase, and they may or may not be at a point where they want to sign on real clients. So what does that mean when it comes to AI governance, right? It means that chances are there might have been some effort prior to when you step into the role. It may be formal, it may be less formal, but what are you walking into and what are you picking as your starting point in terms of building the program, in terms of enablement, right? Are you leveraging existing infrastructure? Are you being required to roll things back, right? Are you building from scratch or are you building from a whole? Understanding that is essential when it comes to negotiation and understanding the opportunity that's in front of you. And of course, the last bit in assessing any kind of opportunity of this nature would be the foundations, right? Budget, resources. What is the scope of being asked of you? What amount, what timeline, what is the business justification? Where is the funding source, right? Because like I'm working with some leaders right now, and as we put in the AI governance program, we're noticing that there's certain things that we need to strengthen within the organization in terms of access and provision of tools. And then there comes the question, well, is that coming out of my AI budget? Or is it coming out of each of the department's budget because it's a tool that they're using? So getting clarity on these things up front or raising it as a question mark, right? Even though you may or may not be able to resolve that today, goes into you evaluating this opportunity. Next thing is highlight your constraint, internal and external. A lot of companies, I think, as they're exploring and going through a lot of these things, are sitting here looking at it. Okay, we think we can do this, right? But as they actually go into doing it, they find that there are more and more and more. But at the same time, maybe marketing has already committed to the public about the posture. Maybe the sales team have already talked clients into potentially signing on to an AI product that, the product team believe that they're ready. So understanding internal and external constraint is key. Last thing is people, right? The mindset, the everyday public that we're looking to enable to help them along in this journey in terms of knowledge, skills, availability, looking at your team, thinking about some of the stuff that we're talking about today, right? Go, okay, I think I need this in the next 3 months. Is there somebody within my team that can grow into that role, that wants to grow into that role, right? Are we going to be able to get help that way? So here's the exercise that I want to share with you. I'm a strong advocate that I don't know how AI is going to turn out for most organizations. I know that a lot of people are rushing towards it. There are different types of AI to increase productivity, AI for innovation. There's the more traditional machine learning. There's generative AI. Regardless, right? But one thing that I always say to data governance professionals is that please take this opportunity to push forward your data governance program, right? And there, as you can see by now, there is potentially a lot of overlap that can occur between data governance and AI governance, right? So if you're like, well, this is all too kind of crazy for me right now, too many flying pieces, what do I do, right? I say start here. Start with looking at all of this through the lens of your data governance program, right? Think about what you want to enhance. Think about what you want to change. Think about what you want to preserve. Use a very strong data governance program as the foundation to start your AI governance journey, right? And the other two buckets is, well, what's irrelevant or obsolete that you don't need to care about, right? Prioritization is always key. And then is what falls into the wait and see category, because there will be plenty of those things that fall into that category. And it's not because of, maybe where you're in your journey, it's where everybody is at in their journey in terms of the technology, in terms of the regulatory situation. There's still a lot of unknowns, and there are a lot of unknowns. So get comfortable with it. The more that you can recognize, the better off that you're going to be. But this is the way to make sure that your AI governance program will become aligned with your data governance program. Because at the end of the day, you can't really make use of AI until you have sorted some of your basic data issues, right? So please take this opportunity as data governance professionals to strengthen your program. Okay, so this is my last slide. Negotiate and shape your role. We covered a lot of grounds today. But if you're looking at this slide and you're like, there's way too much text on there, you've been talking for 45 minutes on a Friday about data governance and AI governance, I want to kill you. Perfectly fine. I want you to walk away with one key message is you can negotiate. Everything you can negotiate, and you negotiate before you start, but also keep in mind that before you start is when you have least information. And why am I emphasizing on this, right? Because you're already leading data governance in your organization, you're part of the organization, you might feel like, oh, it's too late. Things are always done like this within this organization. I know the answer to this. I want you to please take this opportunity of you potentially stepping into the role of AI governance lead in your organization to renegotiate the terms. And that's why on there, I have one thing which is, I feel like quite important, which is negotiate for exceptions. take this opportunity of AI and AI governance to explain, to slow down, to rewrite the rules, to explain to people why whatever they've been thinking previously don't apply. Don't try to sit here and explain and justify all of the wonderful things that you have presented to the organization. I know that they're all true, but the easiest way to gain grounds is to be able to point to the differences and tell people, well, if you want to succeed and if you want this reward from AI, this is why it's different and this is what you have to do differently. And then that's a very strong and powerful negotiation tactic. Always, I look at this as a card game, right? You see that little picture there with the person holding cards. Know your must haves, like to haves, and know how to trade because it's always about a trade, right? Resources, resources, resources. You may be tempted to not ask for more right now because you feel like you don't know enough. This is a big effort, although you can leverage a lot of your AI governance effort, piggyback off of your data governance work, you're going to need more resources. So please set expectations accordingly and negotiate early, right? And again, your stakeholder dynamic may change as you walk into this because some stuff will make sense to come out of their budget, right? And expect change, which is something that we've been talking about the entire 45 minutes or 48 minutes today. But here are my negotiation and shaping your role tips. Thank you very much for your time today. If you have specific questions for your organization, for yourself, looking at it from a career perspective, whatever, reach out on LinkedIn. That's my QR code. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Jovita. A lot to think about there, but I knew there would be. So, we have a few questions and lots of clapping hands, which I totally agree with. There was a question further up. Where have we got? Actually, I need to pop this out and make the chat bigger, I think, so I can read them better. So, I think the first question we had was for Larissa, who was saying about, have you got any tips on becoming better, or has anybody taken a good class on change management? Because she feels that's a weak spot for her. And I think that's a really good key skill set for anybody involved in data governance or AI governance. I don't know, have you got any particular resources you recommend on that?
Um, I need to go back and look, but I haven't. I don't have any offhand. But feel free to message me. I'm happy to share some of my tips after learning a little bit more of where you are in your change journey, organization, and I think a lot of change management in terms of skills, right? It is a very very wearing job. You're out there pushing it all the time. A lot of it is um, finding a way that suits your personality best, right? And I'm gonna say this is, and this is something that I learned from one of my mentors. There's a phrase called "not your sink, not your dishes." It's very very hard. I feel like for change management professionals because we want to see that change. We want to do everything that we can to make that change happen, but it's very easy for us to overextend ourselves. So choosing which battle and sometimes recognizing and walking away and just say, nope, not doing that, right? Could be some of the hardest things. So,
And
but
that's a really good point. And I love that. Not my sink, not my dishes. I'm going to remember that one, Eureka. That's great. A great saying. And I think Louisa shared a book called ADKAR, ADKAR. It's a logical framework for change management, which is useful. So that's
I'm going to look that up too.
yeah,
Thank you.
I'd already copied and pasted that somewhere, so I didn't forget after the masterclass. I love it when you do masterclasses and I always learn from all of my clients and things. I'm always constantly learning and looking for new tips and tricks, which is really good. Um, so um, Larissa's got another question further down here, which says, if your data governance program hasn't been involved in AI projects to date, how do you insert yourself into them after the effect, especially if your data governance program isn't very mature? I think that's a very good question, and from my experience, quite a common situation.
I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about that. So essentially is, we're building out data governance is not necessarily the most mature. You've already absorbed the AI governance responsibility, but previously there was, no interaction with kind of the product team. Is that the dynamics?
I think perhaps Larissa, if you wanted to come off mute and explain, I think she's saying that if the data governance program hasn't been involved in AI, so she's trying to get involved in the AI projects.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in higher education.
Mhm.
And I've just found out that someone has built something somewhere to do some analytics, and I have no idea what they've done, how it's been produced. And I don't want to just march in and say, hey, you need to stop this until we can evaluate it. But I
Mhm.
also want to make sure that data governance is addressed and
Mhm.
consulted before more things are rolled out, essentially.
So you're approaching this from a data governance perspective, not because AI governance has fallen into your lap. Is that the dynamics? Because
Correct. Correct.
okay, so I think something that has always worked for me is that I would approach maybe the business owner or the product manager and show interest and go, okay, I heard you're doing this. It seems really cool, right? And present yourself as somebody who has something to offer. So if it's like a business person, that lead that you're talking to, right, that owns this product, because they're going to be consuming data and they're going to be using data, it's like, oh, I heard about XYZ in this product. I want to learn more. And then offer some of your expertise in that area, right? So it's more like you join them by showing value. I think that's traditionally my approach. And same thing with kind of on the product side, right? If they're going to need data to train their product, then I would be like, oh, hey, I heard you're doing something like this thing that's cool, right? What does it do? And then it's like, are you having trouble like getting some of the data for training? Let's talk, right? So I would start with having something to offer them, right? And then the more you learn, then you can decide if you need to put the brakes on how to present that, right? Does
Yep,
that help?
that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I think that was great. I like that advice, Jovita, about not going in there, kind of going, you mustn't do anything without involving me, but going on and I love that, being interested and offering how you can help rather than just diving in. I think that's great. Great advice. So, let me Chantal has asked, would you be able to share some examples of metrics that we can capture for AI governance? Basically, how can we quantify that we're doing it right? I find this the hardest for data governance. Yeah, metrics are very hard for data governance. I imagine they're probably equally hard for AI governance, are they, Evita?
I think a lot of what metrics it depends on where you are in your maturity and where you are in your journey, right? So for things like enablement, right, which is likely something that most companies are focusing on these days, however mature you are, right? It could be some things that are as simple as engagement, right? You're doing an event of which you've labeled AI governance. What is the engagement in that, right? That sort of a thing. And again, it depends on what you need the metrics for, right? Are you in an organization where you're looking for specific metrics because your budget is tied to it? And then, like, those are the metrics that you need to come up with? Or are you looking to genuinely figure out how well you're doing, right? And, if you are in an early stage, I would actually stay away. And this is, again, not a popular view, it's just my view. Stay away from metrics because I've seen this too many times, is that once a metric is in place, people put blinders on and they only focus on that metric. And for a lot of organizations, when they're still sitting here trying to align on definition of like, what is AI for us? What is Gen AI? what is our strategic next step. If we put metrics to it too early, it's hard to unring that bell. That creates a mental anchor. So again, if there's a metrics that makes sense for you, you will know it. But if you're coming up with a metric, then, if you have to, you have to, right? But it does cause blinder effects. Again, not a very popular opinion because a lot of people like to, right, have that. But what is relevant for you, right, will change over time, right? Depending on where you are, what AI you're deploying, and so on and so forth. So sorry for being vague, but that's what I believe in right now.
Yeah, and it sounds very much the way you're talking, Jovita. It's very much like with data governance. Yes, I can tell you metrics to measure progress with implementing your data governance framework, but metrics to measure the value is very hard because in each circumstance the value is different. So you put one metric in place and it won't measure the right thing. So I'm always a fan of saying, well, just shout about your wins. What problem did you solve? What value did you deliver? And I would think, not being an AI governance expert, but I would feel that that should be the same thing. Did you manage to let an AI initiative deliver value well and quickly because you'd got data governance in place over the data and that kind of thing? Rather, but you can't have a set of standard metrics. Oh, that would make our life so much easier. But sadly, it
Well, but we live with both our heart and our brain, and that's why we can't just go with metrics. But again, take this opportunity to kind of negotiate it as an exception, right? Do mention that it's not just your organization, right? Mention that it's everybody. We're all figuring it out at the same time. It's not to say that, the correct metric or fit for purpose metric won't come up later on, but highlight that you need an exception and that now's not the time to anchor yourself to a metric, perhaps, right?
It's very true. And so there's one last question, if you're all right to hang on a couple more minutes, Jovita. But before that, somebody who doesn't I haven't got a name, just a Zoom user, who's recommended a great change management book called Our Iceberg is Melting. It's very accessible and talks about change management techniques via a story about penguins. That just sounds brilliant. I'm off to read that after this.
Yep.
I've probably got to do some work. But after that, I need to read that book. That just the title's got me hooked. So thank you for sharing that. And Nisreen has asked a question. Says, you mentioned that data governance professionals are often more change management professionals than technical experts. Coming from a technical background myself and having experienced the real challenges of misaligned stakeholders, lack of rules for data quality, unmanaged sensitive data, and so on, I believe technical expertise is equally crucial. Do you think professionals with a strong technical background can skill up to become effective data governance professionals, perhaps even leveraging their technical mindset as a unique strength rather than focusing primarily on management skills?
I think ultimately you need both, right? And I have a technical background myself. I went to engineering school, like did robotics. That's how I started. So I'm not just a lawyer, not just like a change management professional. I think that when working with change, if you have a strong technical background, right, leverage that because you're going to get resonance with your more technical driven colleagues, right? They'll perceive that you speak their language, you will come across refreshing, more practical. Leverage that, right? Use what you have. And when you're using what you have, then you're using your change management skills anyway, right? So I think it's less about is it technical, is it not technical, is when you bring your full self to it, know what you have, leverage what you have, bring your heart and change will happen. So I'm not saying data governance is not necessarily a non-technical role. I think a lot of people, data governance professionals who are very successful don't necessarily have a tech background. So meaning it's not a prerequisite. You have to have a tech background to be a successful data governance professional. But the same thing is true that if you have a strong technical background, then, you can also be a very successful data governance professional, right? At the end of the day, it's how do we leverage our skills to help our peers improve in their practices and get organized with data. So I think that's how I personally would look at it. So sorry if I've miscommunicated.
I tend to agree with you, and I've seen some good technical people become good data governance people. But I think I personally think the people skills are more important. I see people make mistakes when technical people do data governance without the people skills, including one last week when talking to somebody about me training their data owners and data stewards, where they said, we want you to come in and make them do what they have to do because we've been telling them for a year and a half and they're still not doing it. Um, I just go, oops. It was a classic example of somebody not having any people skills. They hadn't talked to their stakeholders. They hadn't understood, what value data governance had to end. They just went, you're a data steward, just get on with it. And then they kept coming back and why are you not doing what we told you to? Um, and they were very technically minded. They thought data governance was a technical discipline. So I think Jovita's right. I do think some of the technical skills add a lot of value. I'm from a business background, but I've learned some technical skills so that I can talk to my technical colleagues. So I think you can come from either direction. I think you need to embrace both skills, but the people skills are really, really important, whichever way. So I think we have run over time. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Thank you so much for all the tips and advice and books in the chat. I've been scribbling things down. It's been great. We will put the recording of this on both of our YouTube channels. So give us a week or so to get for my assistant to get that edited and up there. But I just have a feeling it's probably one that you might want to go back to again and make notes because I think Jovita just gave us too much to process in 1 hour.
Sorry.
So thank you so much, Jovita. I really appreciate you coming in and doing this masterclass for me. And thank you all for joining me. And hopefully you'll join us at another masterclass soon.
Thank you.